Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have the pleasure of welcoming a fellow workplace content creator, Natasha, also known as Nat Out of Office. All the links will be in the description of this podcast. So, firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you for joining the podcast today because I just know that we're going to have a great conversation and it's going to be, I don't use this word lightly, juicy. I know it's going to be juicy and spicy. So, yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I was glad you reached out. I went and looked at your content as well, and I was like, oh man, there's some synergy here alone just based on your takes on stuff. So I'm super excited to have this conversation. I like jamming with people.
Yeah, I think there is going to be synergy. And I think also what I really like about your content is it's hard hitting like mine and it's like no fluff, straight to the point. And I always call it vinegar on a wound. People either like it or they don't, but it has an impact. Like it's like an ouch moment. Push and pull, I
Yeah.
call it. Just to give context for anyone watching this is almost going to be like a full tutorial on how to navigate the workplace. So if you are going through any dramas, any workplace problems of any kind, I can pretty much guarantee between Natasha and I, we are going to cover it off with a solution, something you can do, and then just talking about all the ins and outs. We're going to kick this off because there are many problems in the workplace that haven't been addressed, and I think it's going to be a long time until they are because they are
Yep.
deeply rooted. If you want to kick it off, workplace overview at the moment. Like, what are you seeing? What's coming in on the comments? What's some of the problems that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis within the workplace?
Yeah, what I see on my end is kind of like a very strong divide between leadership slash management and everybody else that kind of has to deal with them. And for me personally, I think it's a very nuanced conversation. Um, I see the one side of things where people are like, I hate my manager, there's favoritism, there's passive aggressive, no one knows how to communicate. Everybody micromanages me, and there's a lot of frustration. And I think there is a lot of managers and leaders out there that probably shouldn't be in that role and shouldn't have been in that role for a long period of time. I also think, on the flip side, that leadership above owners of companies, CEOs, people who are in higher up positions, do not see the value in properly training their management teams and their staff, which you basically promote somebody to their highest level of incompetence and then you leave them out to dry. So I kind of see it from two angles. It's like everybody loves to hate their manager and their leadership, yet none of us want to admit that we're failing management and leadership by not looking at the impact of how it shows up in the workplace on like everybody else that they support beneath them.
Yeah, that's the main issue, right? Is this just starts from the top? It's
Hmm.
just been sort of rolled downhill. It's never been addressed, and it's poor hiring. Like all of these problems come from poor hiring. And just to throw my sort of two pence on that is that I dealt with a lot of graduate managers. And one thing that I saw was fresh out of uni, no experience, hired based on degrees and A levels, no people skills, given a whip to crack and just left to get on with it. And then to go manage, not even lead, but just micromanage people who've been in the job and just sort of boss people around. And again, it came from a poor hire. And something we will talk about, but I think is a real common problem. I've heard you talk about it, and I certainly have covered it. It's almost like the cancer within a poor hire.
Mm.
Not even necessarily the poor hire's fault, like that the person that got hired because they were just accepted for the job, but it really can throw a team off. It can throw an entire workforce off. And I suppose do you see a lot of that as well? Because I know I do.
Yeah, I think that I made a video one time and I was talking about builders and cleaners, and I'm gonna kind of like quickly highlight what that means to me personally. I think you have one camp of people that are builders and they're very passionate, fiery, can rally a team to run through a wall for them, and everyone's just gonna say yes because they just feed off the energy and the passion. That was me before I learned how to be a cleaner and settle down as a business owner and as a leader. Then I think you have cleaners. And cleaners come in and their job is to try to bring order to chaos in an organization and streamline stuff and create structures and systems and basically put people in the right seat on the bus and support them in that seat. I think that a lot of people get hired into a management role to come into a company that has been through a ton of leadership, a ton of management. People are pissed, they're overwhelmed, they're overworked, things are dysfunctional. And because that person has no human skills and soft skills, they come in and start making decisions today that maybe could wait for 4 months, pushing things that they don't need to because they perceive it as a right now problem. And on my take, I think that foundationally, yes, we have a hiring problem. I think a layer below it is that like none of us operate from like first principle thinking. We
Mm.
don't make decisions from a principled place. So we hire somebody, we bring them in, and we don't look at the totality of a situation. And then we just throw people into a role. And there's a bit of turmoil on the team, and that person comes in and starts making decisions and ruffles the fuck out of every single person's feathers. And they might not be terrible at what they do, but like, God, read a room. But nobody supported you in learning how to read the room or the room that you're even walking into. So I think there's a level of responsibility from the individual to come into a room and say, like, hey, I don't have full context here. No one's going to give me full context. I'm going to observe quietly, read between the lines and figure out what's going on, and then kind of make my moves from there. But we don't do that because we're so quick to like rush into shit.
Yeah, I had that myself where managers were literally dropped in the deep end. You know, again, a lot of graduates and people who didn't have that experience, and they were dropped in the deep end just to figure it out. And they just, I've seen it where they just were like, well, I'm a manager. I might as well just start telling people what to do. It doesn't seem to be broken, but hey, I think I need to prove a point here. I'm going to start changing shit up. And that ruffles feathers. And that's the problem. I think if I had my way, and I've done like a 5 things I would ban in the workplace. But seriously, I would ban the word manager and I would just make it either leader of some sort or team leader, or I would just base it on numbers like your level 1, level 2, level 3. But also, I would be looking at having reviews from the workforce and actually asking them, hey, it's been a week since your new manager's here. How are they getting on? Because, like you just said, they're not going in and they're being like, do you know what? I'm holding my hands up. I'm brand new. You guys and girls have been running this for however long. Let me fit in. Let me learn from the ground up. As and where you need me, let me support and,
Yeah.
anything you need. And communication. I know you were touching on like no context, right? Which is lack of communication. So something we will definitely cover off later on is the lack of communication. But I know that's a massive problem. What what are you seeing is probably the most common problem that you get in the comments? Like, what's something that people are really dealing with on your side that you see, which is really common at the moment?
Yeah, probably around communication. I think people don't know how to have uncomfortable conversations in a way that is effective at any level, regardless if they're a manager down or a team member up, saying, like, hey, I'm noticing this. My manager is dumping a bunch of extra work on me and it's starting to burn me out. Like, how do I navigate that? Like, nobody equips us how to have productive conversations. And if you don't have that skill, you either won't say shit if your mouth is full of it because you don't want to be taken out of context. I also think there's a level of can you discern the difference between this is how I feel versus what is true? Because your feelings are 100% valid to you, but they're not always 100% valid to the situation. And when you don't clarify that, it's very difficult to go have a conversation if you haven't gathered the facts and found like what is the principled truth of what it is you're going to communicate, right? So, an example, if your manager is consistently dumping stuff on your plate, at some point you have to decide if you respect yourself enough to have that conversation and be like, hey, this is what I am noticing, and like set your boundaries and be willing to communicate that with people. But people don't. They keep saying yes to stuff because they feel that they have to, because they've never been equipped on how to have a conversation. Then they get burnt out, then they get frustrated and they quit their job. But then they leave. And like my thing, and I'll probably come back to this multiple times throughout this episode. At the end of the day, you can't control what anybody else does. Your workplace might be shit. Corporate America in general is probably challenging. But at the end of the day, like you have to be responsible for yourself and how you navigate and move through this world. So, like, learn how to communicate. Take that on yourself. Have very clear yeses and nos. And if you don't like it, then find another path because everywhere you go, you're the common denominator, regardless of the shit that's going on around you.
Yeah, for anyone listening, what you just said there, boundaries, and we'll definitely touch on boundaries. I think a top tip for everyone listening is that where there's communication problems, actually a lot of that can stem from maybe you not having enough boundaries. Because one thing I had was boundaries. Every time I had a new manager start, this is no joke, true story here. One of my old managers sometimes joins my live streams, and he's a good friend of mine, is that a lot of the new managers, they would have to go see the scene, they would get pulled in by senior management and told about me and said, basically, you're going to be above Aaron, but leave him alone. Like, don't step on his toes, let him get on with it. Because I had such strong boundaries, I didn't
Yeah.
need to be told to suck eggs. And communication. So here's one for you. I've done many videos on it. I'm sure you've covered it, no doubt. Communication also can be a little bit daunting for people because it's almost like if I communicate and if there's a problem, so for anyone listening, if you are going through problems, this is something to listen to. People are afraid to speak up because they are, let's just call it what it is, they are in fear of their job. They have bills, they've kept up with society in terms of expenditure and consumer debt and all this kind of stuff. So they are afraid to communicate or say to a manager, well, I didn't know about that. They don't want to push back and say what's right because they fear for their job. So, what's your advice around people who actually, although communication's the problem, they feel they can't?
Yeah. I think there's two parts to it. Number one, you are responsible for discernment in any situation that you're in. So let's say I work for a company and I repeatedly see a pattern that anybody that goes and communicates with that manager ends up losing their job or difficult things start happening post that conversation. You would be wise to use the discernment that there is a pattern of behavior here, and I probably wouldn't go have that conversation. I would instead read what is going on in the team dynamics and use critical thinking to make an assessment on whether or not I am in an environment where having this conversation will actually be productive. So
Yeah.
that to me is like step number uno, because I think there's some places that you just shut your fucking mouth and you move on with your life and you go find another job. And I'm not here to say that resources and financial means don't matter, because they do, but like look around you. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out the type of environment you're in. So I think that's number one. Number two, look at it and say, hey, everyone's feeling this way, but like nobody is communicating with this person, because there are some managers or people in leadership roles that I promise you are just literally that unaware. And I think you have to make the discernment of, are you truly in an environment where speaking up and having a conversation is going to hurt you and put a target on your back? Or are you in an environment where the person just like they need a conversation and you can approach it in a way that isn't belittling, defensive, or causing issues, and you can be grounded in what you need to communicate and ask for what you need. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like discernment, because I'm not going to sit here and be like, yes, in every single workplace, it is totally safe for you to go have a conversation, because it's not, but you are responsible for discerning when it is and when it isn't. And if you're in an environment where there is no proof that having this conversation leads to negative consequences, then you're perpetuating your own suffering by refusing to fucking communicate.
I'd second those. And then to add maybe two myself, as I always say to people, the way to overcome any problem in the workplace is get some FU money in the bank. Look after your finances because you feel pretty damn good about yourself when you know you've got money in the bank. And also, just to remind everyone at this point, no one really should put up with any crap. You're all human beings. You all deserve the same respect, regardless of the level of what someone is and what salary they're on. Everyone deserves respect. The other thing that I would say is there's strength in numbers. If there is a common pattern, there's a common theme happening. It's very hard to raise an issue with a manager that perhaps has been hired because he's friends with another manager or she's friends with another manager. But there is strength in numbers. But it's funny actually. There's a term, I don't know if you've seen this, a friend of mine who recently left his job, same place I used to work at years ago, pleasanteeism. And what that is basically loss of identity, pretending to be someone, pretending to laugh for 40 hours every week that you actually don't know who you are. So you've fallen into this being very pleasant, which is totally fake and it's not real, which is leading to a lot of mental health issues and depression and a midlife crisis. Because for 40 hours every single week, you are pretending to be a character so you don't get highlighted. This is a point for everyone to listen to. You'll end up causing a rod for your own back. This is the problem with lack of communication in like a relationship. You bottle up for a certain period of time, it's going to blow, right? I suppose around communication, what's your view? You mentioned about it. Maybe just go look for another job. That's kind of what I think about all of it. I just, I draw a line under it. Let bygones be bygones. If you don't think you can overcome it, just quietly quit, as they say, that's the term, and just move on to bigger and better things and be wiser next time round. If someone can't communicate, is that kind of maybe what you'd say if they feel their back's against a wall for mental headspace, just go get another job?
I got nuanced takes about everything. So, first off, I am going to use relationships as an analogy. When we look let's use a friend. Your friend's dating somebody. You meet the guy, you watch his behavior, you listen to the way he talks, the thing he said, like the things he says. And over the course of a couple interactions, you got a pretty solid pattern that like this person probably isn't someone you should be in a relationship, right? We're really good at pattern recognition. So when it comes to communication, if you can recognize that, like, hey, this relationship or this dynamic is actually dysfunctional, then, like, I am in the camp of, like, what is the point of having that conversation? Because there's no desire here for someone to change, right? You can listen to what people say and identify if they're open to feedback and they genuinely want to grow based on how they talk. So for me, it is listening more than you speak, making the discernment of is that person actually open to have these conversations? And when you watch them interact with other people, what is their personality and their character like? If you can identify that this person is closed off, they are reactive, they are passive aggressive, they are inconsistent, they speak poorly about other people behind their back when they're not in the room, yeah, probably not worth it to have the conversation because the person probably doesn't give a fuck to change. And they sure as shit aren't going to listen to you on the team, someone that they don't even respect. So it's like going to a partner who is dysfunctional. They want to keep drinking every single week and they have no desire to change and they do nothing. It's like you're best to just get out of the relationship and let them figure it out for themselves. So I think that's number one. It's like, can you identify the pattern and then decide, is it worth it? Would you have this conversation based on these things? So I don't know if that like gives clarity or answers, but I think
Yeah.
it
I,
applies to all areas of our life.
I think trying to at least be a good judge of character, because that's what I used to do. When I would see new people come in the workplace, I would see it as a bit of a savannah. And I would kind of look at who's got a bit of clout, who's loud, who would always speak up in the meeting. And I would try and prejudge people's movements, what they would do in like a meeting. I was very I applied self-mastery, I think just because of the character that I was, but everyone would get their chance to speak in a round meeting or whatever it was, or a huddle, all these pointless huddles, and I just didn't say a lot because I felt there was no need, but I would listen to other people who say stuff, and I think that didn't work in your favor, and just learning to judge people and when to talk and when not to talk. And I think that's a quality everyone listening in should probably try and develop, is knowing when and when not to talk. So
Yeah. One thing I want to add to that, and I think it's so critical for people, it's like it's awareness, right? It's not even just self-awareness, it is practicing awareness overall. If you don't learn that skill, you will continue to end up in jobs and careers and places you have no business being in because you won't even pick up on shit in the interview. You won't ask questions to understand what is the culture like here? How many managers have you been through? And you don't have to ask the questions that blunt. But if you don't practice self-awareness, like this isn't going away. You might quit this company, but you will go to the next one because you are the common denominator that you're not clear on what you want and what is a yes and what is a no for you. And this problem just perpetuates. So I think awareness is so important because you'll just go through. It's like, why is it that when you look at people's exes before they figured their shit out, you date the same chick, you date the same dude? Like 8 to 10 times, right? Like if you pooled all of someone's dysfunctional exes into a room, there's a common pattern across all of it. So if that is true in relationships, which is the closest thing to our center, I guess, like family dynamics, different things we go through in life, then why would that pattern not show up the exact same in the workplace? It's like you have the same job and the same cultures that you gravitate to. So like to me, this is a self game.
It's funny. There's a terminology which I use. I use it in a lot of my breakdowns, and it's called control the controllables. And what that means is I talk a lot about this is that, we can't control government. But what we could do is if we don't like a job, we can control that. Going into a job interview, again, just being a little bit mindful of they're asking questions that don't make me feel comfortable, and maybe that this is a culture I don't want to be in. And again, feeling bold enough to ask the questions in the job interviews, because I don't know about you, but the last time I had a job interview, I mean, my God, it was in like, I don't know, like 2000 and freaking 12 or whatever it was, or 2013, something like that. And a lot has changed now, but I do say to people, be mindful of the questions you're being asked, but ask questions yourself, because if they're hesitant to ask them, or they don't want to, they might not give you the job anyway, but you might have saved yourself an absolute headache getting into the job, and then you're back to square one. So that's an important point for people to listen to.
I have a little quick story because like we recruit, like a big chunk of what we do in one of our companies is like heavily recruitment for like appointment setters and placing people to help build sales teams. So we're constantly interviewing, and we've been interviewing probably every other day for 5 years straight with people. We had someone on our team get recruited from a different company. No big deal, whatever. She ends up putting in her notice with us. She had worked for me for quite a few years. It was her very first job she ever had, was working for our company. She gets recruited. There was different benefits there. The recruiter asked her to put in her notice with us, but never secured the job. So she was said, hey, in order to move forward with the interview process, you need to give your notice to your employers, and then I will call them for a reference check. For me, that's a red flag. You're being asked to put in your resignation with a company before you are secured a job somewhere else, and then you are being asked to give references from the company that you just put in your notice for to help you secure this job. So, red flag number one. But again, lack of discernment. You didn't even think to question that. That to me screams like unethical fucking hiring practices,
Yeah.
right? So, this ends up playing out. Our general manager ends up taking the reference check with her, speaks praises, and it's like, cool. But like, he was very honest. Like, there was some things that happened. This is what's up. And she's really good. And if you hire her for this role, this is where she's going to need support. So we gave a very honest review. The recruiter didn't like it and then asked to speak to more members on the team. And then I drew the line and I was like, this isn't a fucking Yelp review. Like, back off, right? But again, red flag. You are now crossing boundaries and trying to communicate with other people within an organization, and you're being inappropriate. So she ended up leaving. She ended up getting the job. And on her final day, all I could think about was like, you left a company that genuinely loved you and cared about you, has poured into you for a couple years, and you're about to go work for a company that the entire recruiting process was a red flag. I
Mm.
don't need you to tell me that your heart's in your ass. I can see it on your face right now on this final call. But it was like a really big life lesson, right?
And it's quite a nice ask.
So, so I share that because like it just fucking use critical thinking, like pause. What you
I,
said, when someone's asking you questions, like pause and slow down. Why is someone asking you this? And in the way they're asking you to do something.
but I think as a society anyway, I don't think a lot. That's the problem. I think we're so,
Absolutely not.
this is slightly, this is within what we're talking about. But I think as a society as a whole, life is so quick and fast and high pressured, and social media is putting so much almost like this unconscious pressure on people to move quick and try and make decisions, that people are in a state of reactive all the time rather than proactive and thinking. And I think for anyone listening is actually, when you're making decisions, slow down for a moment and just really think, is this going to be good for me? Because yeah, you can end up at ground zero, and that can be a pain in the arse. So I have a big question. I'm going to throw it straight at you. Co-workers, do you trust them? Yes or no?
I think people become friends with coworkers based on proximity and not based on values. And I think we blurred the lines of being connected in the workplace with this person is my friend. And how I see the workplace is like we should have friendly relationships, and we should have like work well together, play, be able to laugh, be humorful, do good work together. But I think there are lines in what you share and whom you share it with, and to the degree in most workplaces. And I think you would be foolish to think that at the end of the day that this isn't a job and that
Yeah,
it's not business.
that's the thing. It's business. It always is. And I have seen, because I've done so much content on this, I'm pretty sure I hold the search engine for this bad boy, but I have done
Top
so
of the
much.
ratings.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you search me up, my face, my mugshot will come up. Is that you are being put into a environment with people that you would never normally choose to be with, and there is constantly this Pac-Man chasing you, which is your mortgage or whatever's going on. Everyone's got their own Pac-Man chasing them, and it's financially driven. And I actually talk about the corporate workplace or employment, whatever kind of workplace you work in, as a pyramid shape. And it becomes acute. Whereas entrepreneurship, as you all know as well, it actually starts acute because you're niching and you're finding your feet, but then it becomes limitless and it's
Yeah.
very collaborative and it grows and it's the sky's the limit. Whereas it comes to a point, and then that is a high pressured point. And I actually think that people, it would do them well to, before they start getting too friendly with people, is actually to sit back and go, they are feeding someone else. Like they have a roof to keep over their heads. I think I shouldn't let on this certain bit of information. I probably shouldn't tell them about that. I probably, I just think, again, rationale, again, being more proactive rather than reactive. But do you find, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I have found personally, what I've seen, and comments and emails, and God knows what else, I'm sure you get them, is that there are a lot of people I just feel are quite lonely and they just want to attach themselves to anyone and everyone. But just a little flip to throw at you as well is I actually find it even dangerous, even more dangerous when people are feeling lonely. So they're like, well, Aaron, I spend more time with my coworkers than I do my family, so I should just befriend them. Then you become a people pleaser, a yes man or a yes woman. You're a chameleon. You mold to everyone. I find that very untrustworthy. I'm Marmite. You either like me or you don't. But you know where you stand with me, and I'm authentic through and through. And I think likewise for you as well. So I do think becoming friends with coworkers, you're becoming two very untrustworthy people. At some point, it'll end badly. I've just seen it too many times and I've experienced it myself.
Yeah, I've experienced it myself as well, being friends with somebody in a workplace and then finding personal information in conversations outside of the workplace that I was like, I wish I didn't know that. And you never told me about that because this is now influencing how I view you in the workplace and my ability to trust you. I'm also going to give a very honest take as somebody who is a business owner. So, I, at the peak of our business, was responsible for like 150 team members. So I've had the dynamic of like multiple team members and different things. There was somebody on our team that was about to be let go, but ended up putting in her notice prior, falls kind of into the camp of some cancerous behavior, right? I was new, inexperienced. This got perpetuated a little bit too long. She was kind of in a supervisor manager role. She ended up getting let go. I would be lying to you if I said, as a business owner, I didn't want to fire everybody that was friends with her outside of work. Like, straight the fuck up. And
Yeah.
like, nobody's willing to say that because I took one look at her and I was like, these people, there's a couple people on our team that are higher up in kind of a little bit of a leadership role that are friends with you, have spent time with you, went on trips with you, spent time with you outside of work. And now, as a business owner, I feel that keeping you in this organization is a threat to secure information that could potentially be passed down to her. And I straight up would be lying if I said I didn't want to fire them just simply through association. So,
Mm.
with that being said, as somebody who's very unfiltered about it, yes, I think you'd be wise to pay attention to like who you connect to in the workplace. Because at the end of the day, for me, I love our team. I go above and beyond. I'm very big on culture and leadership. At the end of the day, it is my job to grow this business and take care of everybody that is connected to it.
I'll second all of that. I know the feeling of what you're saying. I'm very detached. I can compartmentalize. I can kind of stay very emotional. I can make rational decisions. I can think about things. And but I was friendly with a guy that I used to work with. We were in a small team. There was a lot of people, but we were working small teams. And I was almost prepared for it, and I wasn't shocked. Again, I always got my money right, so I was okay. Like nothing really phased me, and I never really had any problems anyway. But he started to kind of change, although we were very close. But I could tell he was being given the rub on the back, and it was the just tell us what you get up to on your shift, and we want to know a little bit more about Aaron because I was a very influential person. So for anyone else listening, they don't like influential people. Like when we've done these videos about signs they're going to get rid of you, it typically is you're either threatening the manager, not knowing but indirectly threatening the manager in their position. You're influential, and I was kind of all those things. And this certain individual started to change, and I just noticed it, and I was like, and he was spending a lot of time in the office, and I was like, okay, maybe this promotion that's coming up in 6 months' time, maybe you've been told that you might be the guy for it, but in order to have that, they need to know something on me.
Mm.
And I was starting to get emails, and certain things were being revealed, and I would play, so I've seen it, and I've seen other people go through very similar things. And I think the message for anyone listening is that, again, boundaries,
Yeah.
have these boundaries in place. I mean, that's just I don't know if is it just us, or but isn't that just an obvious thing to have boundaries? I do maybe think you learn it with age and maturity and from being burnt, right? But
Yeah.
boundaries is what keeps us all sane. I'm sure of it, right?
I think I agree. I think we don't set boundaries because we fear the repercussions if we do. Like so many people at the end of the day are not solid in themselves. They don't know what they value. They don't know what is a yes for them. They don't know what they want. So let me just do whatever is required and walk the path and not say shit if my mouth is full of it. I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. And if I could just get what I need, I'll be good. And then they don't set boundaries because we fear confrontation. Well, what happens if I set this boundary and you don't like me? It's like, okay, so what? But that's so uncomfortable if you don't like yourself, right? And I say this to like our managers that I train and support all the time. It's like, well, I don't want to have this conversation. It's like, cool. What if you don't have this conversation? It's like, what if I have this conversation and they leave? Yeah, but what if you don't and they stay? Like, I don't want to set this boundary. Okay, but what if you don't? And now worse things happen to you, right? You remind me of somebody who's very ungovernable. Like that's the vibe I get from you. It's like you don't want to be governed by other people. And because of that, you're like, here are my lines. Do not cross it. I also get the feeling that when you were in the workplace, you probably did really good work,
Yeah.
but you had like,
Yeah.
yes, like you did what you needed to. You delivered on like what you were hired to do, and you probably did it with a standard of excellence, but you didn't take much shit.
No. And I think the other thing is as well, and we can tie this in because this is something coming up. I also never went for promotion because I was always building my own thing. So I knew that I wanted to work on my own thing. I knew I wanted to escape and get out eventually. But they didn't like it that I stayed in the same role. I'd done the job. I was effective. I did a 10-hour shift, but I did most of my tasks within the first 45 minutes, outsourced the rest, and it was kind of playtime. It was kind of playtime.
I bet you were just a pain in everyone's
I
ass.
really was. I really was, and actually, a lot of them really wanted me to fail. And ironically, and the whole thing, and I didn't. And a lot of them watched me. Some of them used to come on my live stream, and yeah, I was, but I did have those boundaries, and I wish more people would. But I just want to share mine. I do feel, and we'll go over more of these problems and solutions and good leadership and all this kind of stuff. I do feel this comes down to one thing though. You can not be confident, you can have low self-esteem, but ultimately I feel that the solution to all workplace problems is having your money right. It literally is that simple. And I say this to everyone. If you were being bullied, harassed, micromanaged, you had a gutty feeling, Sunday feeling, you were apprehensive, but if I was to go and drop £100,000 into your bank account that day, are you going to go into work tomorrow and be spoken to like a twat? You won't, because you could be all shy and timid and all broken and whatever. But if you've got 100 grand sitting in the bank, you won't stand there and let someone talk to you like that because you'll be like, well, I've got money to last me like the next 5 years.
Hmm.
Literally, I do feel that is the one thing is money. Get your money right, you don't worry about any problems. But is there just quickly before we move on to something else with co-workers? Other than the money solution, because a lot of people will go, well, Aaron, that's all right, but I can't make my own money. I have to be in a job. Do you think there is like a one fixes all problems kind of solution for bullying, micromanaging, hating your job? Do you think there's another solution to fix it all other than money?
I mean, I'll always go a layer deeper. I agree with the money thing. When your bills are paid and your money's right, you operate from a totally different headspace because you're not in scarcity. I also think when you're really clear on what you stand for, you also operate from a different place. Because even if you are in that environment for a duration of time, you will communicate and you'll just carry yourself different. Like when we come back to, well, why don't people set boundaries? It's like, well, because there is a little bit of a self-worth issue. Okay, well, instead of me sitting here being like, heal 28 years of fucking trauma that you've experienced, it's like, can we just start with like, what do you value? It's like, I value honesty. Okay, cool. Write that down. Write down what you value. Maybe you have like 5 to 6 things and you're like, I stand really strongly for this. Cool. What does that look like in practice for you? I'm going to tell myself the truth. about the situation, right? I value responsibility. Responsibility to me at this point in my life isn't just about like self-responsibility, it's what's responsible to me, to you, and to the collective. How can I identify that? Because when you're so clear on who you are and what you stand for, you just move different in this world. And different opportunities open up for you because when you're that convicted in who you are, that radiates everywhere you go. You don't have to be a loud person. You don't have to be like overly zealous. You don't have to take up a lot of space in a room, but there's just this like quiet conviction in who you are. And I think that like that is a cure all for people. And now I don't think that dissolves favoritism or micromanagement or like toxic behaviors in the workplace, but it makes you move through this world different. I experience such little shit in my life because I'm so fucking clear on
Yeah.
who I am to the point that it just repels people and repels bullshit. Even when I was in the workforce and comparative, like comparing that, let's say almost close to like 10 years ago compared to now, I still didn't deal with a lot of shit at work because I was so clear on what I stood for. And I had a manager that was passive aggressive and were all the things that I talk about. And I just had like really clear lines in how I communicated what mattered to me. And I just feel that like when you are clear on what you value and what is a yes and how you're going to show up in this world, you just like repel fucking bullshit because people can feel it the moment you walk through into the room. And I feel like it shifts the way that people interact with you, whether that's not at all and they just avoid you, or they soften and they're curious about you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think having that level of no BS, like you're not willing to put up with crap and just having that little bit about you. And I know that's hard for some people because we're talking about this. You're very confident. I'm very confident, and that might come naturally or that's been built up over time and resilience. But I think for everyone, just to have a little bit of realization that going back to it's all business, everyone here is replaceable. I think having a like a self-evaluation of almost like an internal reality check, just going, right, my job's my job. I'm doing it because I'm paying my bills. They don't love me. We are absolutely not a family. My co-workers, I get on with them. I'm polite. I enjoy it, but ultimately, push comes to shove, they're not going to be there. Right? Okay, I can think about that. And if something was to happen, if I was to leave or I was to get fired, would they replace me pretty quick? Likelihood is yeah. And I just think when you remind yourself of that, you can kind of, I don't know, I would like to think people can get a little bit more like thicker skin because I feel that's what people need. All these problems that come my way, I can tell in the comments, the emails, they're at a low point where the self-esteem's pretty low. And it's so obvious, and that goes across all problems. And that, I mean, there could be many different reasons why, but also just quickly, I feel your workplace problems become so much easier when you talk to your partner about them as well. Because I know, and I've done some content around men who bottle things up in terms of, they go home and the missus is wondering why they're miserable as shit and they're snapping at the kids is because they've got the financial pressure, but also, again, I do a lot of content about it. But I've seen big guys like, I'm 5'11", but I've seen like 6'6" guys, be shouted at by a little, freaking 8 stone wet through little squirt. They don't say a word because they know that man or woman might have an impact on their job and the safety of it. So, yeah, I just think thick skin, have boundaries.
Something to add that I think is like a formula for people to pay attention to. Like a lot of the questions are like, how do you set boundaries? Or like, how do you do this thing? And it's like we always focus on like, what do I have to do to create a different outcome? But we never ask the question of like, who do I have to be?
Yeah.
And without getting super woo and spiritual, it's like, be, do, have. Like, who do you have to be? And then how does that person show up? And you get different outcomes. So everything that I keep coming back to, it's just like be so clear on who you are. And like you might not be that person yet, but if you imagine yourself as a 5% more confident version of yourself, what would that look like? A simple example is you get an email from something that shouldn't be a fucking text conversation. And you reply and be like, hey, I think there is a bit more nuance or discussion around this. Can we set up a time to chat? And can I call you? That's a fucking boundary. Don't email me this shit, right?
Yeah.
And you're not being rude, you're being very polite about it, but it's like, this is my line. But what does 5% more confidence look like? Well, it's not just accepting the shit that everybody throws on you. right? And I think that's a very like simple example for somebody. Um, but focus on who do you have to be and write that out. And I get that that sounds probably a little esoteric for people, but like, yo, at this point, if your self-esteem's that low, you got nothing to fucking lose. So you might as well figure out who you want to be and then start showing up as that person because your whole life will radically shift in a 12-month time period if you truly commit to that.
I want to ask you the question, co-workers and social media. I am like, psh, no. I used to, if I saw someone new come into the company, I used to ask people, who's the new person? Oh, so and so. I used to go on all my social media platforms, block, 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 block. Because again, I just think it's eradicate the nosiness now. Whereas some people are like, well, it's another friend, it's another follower. I am an absolute no-no, but what's your take on co-workers and social media?
I have an appreciation for just how unhinged you are. I think it's great. You're like,
We
no,
would have
man,
been great.
fuck off. Um, don't go there. I don't think anything good happens engaging with a lot of people on social media. Like, especially now, one thing that I think is even more pertinent, you can see what your followers, like if you follow someone, you can see what reels they're liking. I personally find that so invasive. I don't even like stuff right now on social media because my following keeps growing and we have a ton of clients and our team members, probably I know our team members follow me on social media. So I could be out here liking stuff about politics that would just send somebody through the roof. So, like, yes, absolutely hard boundaries. Do not follow your team members. Do not let them follow you. Be very mindful of what you're doing on social media. I think if you're not entrepreneurial and you're not building a personal brand and your platform is not intended to be public, like lockdown. Like I would not have that shit be public.
Yeah, but it also it influences people, doesn't it? Because you can go into a work environment, and some of you listening, you might be in the work environment and you like someone, but again, you see what they're liking, or you see, oh, they've just signed up to that OnlyFans, or whatever it might be, and then you're like, oh, didn't see you in that kind of light. And
100%.
yeah, and I think again, that's a boundary that could have been not overstepped just by simply going, look, we're here to do a job, let's get on, let's be polite, great, hope you had a good weekend, but let's not take it any further, which leads me on to the next one, which is a common one that I get, and I don't know why I get this question more times than I think I should. Aaron, should I go on the works do? I never really used to go out for the drinky poos at
Mm.
work because I've learned as I'm getting older, I've become more introverted, and like you, I am very blunt. Aaron, do you want to meet? No. Like, why? For what? Like, I barely want to see you anyway. I don't want to go and meet you outside when there's no return on my time. The works dues. Do you go out on the works dues? Is it okay just to go on a few? Like, I don't want to poo-poo it from my side, but is it okay a few of them, or what's your take on it?
I think it really comes back to like everything else I've said. It's like, who do you want to be? What is a yes for you and what's a no? For me, I don't want to cross certain lines. I think that it comes back to like the social media thing, to being friends. If you do go out, be very mindful of what you're engaging in and the conversations that you're having. Like, I think there's just how far are you willing to go? My dad was a general manager, superintendent of like big mining companies. And he was always an expat. So he would fly into these countries. All these other expats are there. They're engineers. He was the only person who never went out for drinks with the crew at the end of the night. And they hated it because it was like, why don't you come out and have drinks with us? And he's like, because I'm not your friend. Like, I'm here to be friendly. I will be supportive of you, but I'm your manager and like I'm here to lead this team and get outcomes. And there's no need for me to be having beers with you guys at 8 o'clock. So everybody would leave, they would go out for drinks, and he would go to his room and he would call his kids and his wife and he would hang out. And that was a really hard boundary for him. And that was something that he didn't say don't do it, but through those stories, it was kind of an unspoken
Yeah.
boundary to be planted. Like, I don't do that because I don't want to mix personal with work because I have to show up and lead in this way and do what is best. So, like, I don't even cross those lines with people.
And
So,
can you
my point kind of is like, I fall into that camp, like, be very mindful.
it can lead to those awkward conversations, which again is something I'm asked is, my answer is so simple. And I've spoken about this on YouTube videos where people say, I'm trying to remove people off social media now, but what do I say when they come up to me the next day? Or if they come up to me and they're like, oh, did you block me on social media? My answer to them, as I've said, just say, yeah, I did. I don't want you on there anymore. Like I blocked you. But then some people have said to me, yeah, but what happens in that moment when they look at you? Stare at them. I don't know, walk off. I just like that's kind of what I'm like, is that if someone came up to me and was like, did you block me? I'd be like, what? Well, I did, but hang on. Why were you looking? I'd be
Yeah.
like, hang on, I'm throwing this back up. Why are you looking? How did you know that I blocked you? Well, I was looking for you. Yeah, that's weird. So, like, why are you looking for me? But anyway, that it avoids those conversations, right? So,
Yeah.
for anyone listening at this point, by the way, me and Natasha are going to do an undercover workplace. I'm going to fly over to America, and we're going to go into a job. I'm going to wear like a Charlie Chaplin tash, and Natasha's going to wear a different wig and something like that. We're going to go with all funny hair, and we're going to go take over the world. So, leadership, it's very rare, isn't it? There's managers who are managing and stuff like that. But for you, what is a leader? What does that look like in the workplace?
Yeah. I'll speak through the lens of owning like my own business and having a team and a lot of people that look up to me. The biggest thing for me when it comes to leadership is like, is what you say in public how you behave in private? And are you willing to own your shortcomings? Like, I don't believe that anyone's perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fuck a lot of stuff up. And I think that as humans, we have a lot of grace and willingness to let people fail forward because we understand that, like, us too have made mistakes. Where there's no tolerance is when somebody doesn't want to admit that and admit where they fell short. So to me, leadership is being congruent with what you say and being so willing to close the gap on who you say you are versus what you're doing. And the moment that you notice that you are like outside of that gap, quickly course correcting it and then assuming full responsibility for it. And I think that if people just started there, teams would have more respect for them. And it'd be like, cool, like there is trust. Because how do you build trust with somebody? Well, you build trust because the person is consistent in their actions.
Mm.
Who you tell me you are is how you actually fucking show up. And you do it for a long period of time, regardless of the circumstances and the external factors that influence it, right? You can
Yeah.
tell me that you care, that you're going to show up. I'm here for you. And then the first time that doesn't happen, I question everything you've set up until this point. So I think like leadership is just, can you be consistent in who the fuck you say you are? And when you're not, can you immediately own it and be like, yo, I fell short? Because will have grace for you if you do that. I've made so many mistakes building a business. I have disappointed people. I have frustrated so many people. A lot of the stuff that I talk about is I've either lived it or I've tolerated on our team or I've experienced it recruiting and managing teams within other organizations. So that's how we learn, but can you quickly tighten the gap on that?
I love that. Same for me. It's how you build a brand and a business, right? Consistency, you build trust. As soon as you vanish, people are like, what happened? And then they question it. And it
Yeah.
is the same with a good leader. I've seen a few good leaders. I've seen really poor ones or poor managers, but it is those traits of, I suppose, things that are missing and good leaders have them is compassion and empathy, actually understanding the human element over metrics. I think that's something, anyone who is in a leader position or a managerial is always look at the people first. Because I've always found, and I always said to the new managers that came in, it was funny because although they were new managers coming in, really I ran the fucking show. But they would come in, but I would say to them, look after us and we'll look after you. And it was that simple. And I think when you have happy people and you have a good culture, and I think that's a really important part of that lead that mid ground of that leader is to go, okay, I've got people above me, but the priority is my team and looking after them. The groundwork's going to get done. I'm going to worry about that. That's going to be a high output. I've just got to make sure that I'm backing them and going back to what you said, that I'm going to be consistent. When they need me, I'll be there. The support, when things are communicated downhill, I'm going to make sure they know about it so that they don't fuck up and there's a mistake. And accountability. I think that's something that also I love about entrepreneurship is you said it, but the good, the bad, the ugly, we own all of it, right? where we've
Yes.
been, where we are now, where we're going. It's no one else's fault. So there's no victim mentality, and I think that is a great example of of someone who could be a great leader who just owns it all. Whether it was a not, and do you know what? I think I was going to say the success, but actually giving the success, being able to own the failure because something went wrong, but also then to pass on to the success to the ones it's due. I think that's a great leadership skill. I've seen many people where, behind closed doors, they would steal the success and no one would ever find out about it.
Yeah.
Compassion and empathy, I think that's lacking as well.
I think it's also like when you, what we were talking about earlier, it's like listen to people and how they talk and how they show up. I think you can tell somebody who values being a good leader by the language they use and is it inclusive.
Mm.
I There is nothing more disheartening to somebody on a team than doing a lot of work and hearing the leader be like, yeah, this is, I produced these results. I created this. There's no we. There's no team. There's no inclusion in that. So what you said, I agree with it as well. It's like leaders assume full responsibility when everything goes wrong and they give all the credit when things go right. Something that has really helped me in my entrepreneurial journey is like nothing is about me, but everything is of me. This is not all my success to own. I didn't create it all. I would be nothing without all the people who are a part of what we build. But everything is of me. So if everything is of me, that also means the dysfunction as well as all of the wonderful things about it, right? Because everything outside of you is just like a reflection of how you show up in this world. And I think leaders are willing to admit that. And they're even willing to look in the mirror and be like, this is where I got to work on some shit. Because you'll never be perfect. That never goes away. Like,
Do you know what as well? It's funny you say about that because I nearly missed that, and that was something I did want to bring up today. I've just made a note of it. The terminology in which management and senior leaders use. One thing I could not stand, and I remember addressing a guy, I won't say his last name, he's called Jack. He was a night shift manager. And I remember pulling him aside when I heard him say it. He was talking in this sort of like huddle handover meeting, and he said, "Oh, I think at the moment I've got about 40 under me at the moment." And I remember saying to him, and this is where a lot of my content, I said, "You haven't got anyone under you." He
mm,
said, "What do you mean?" I said, I heard you say you've got 40 under you. You've got no one under you. You've got team members. You've got people working with you that you serve." And he
yeah,
was like, "Well, that's what I meant." No, well, by you saying under me, it's a very negative. Like it's a very kind of like if they had heard that directly under me, it kind of paints that picture of you're looking down at people. And I think just little changes like working with me, instead of a manager saying, "Well, you work for me."
yeah,
And really just changing that language can really help someone be like, "Oh, I feel a part of this."
yeah.
And that's these little minor details I feel where a lot of these problems can be solved. So
I want to add something. It's not necessarily like in the workforce, but it is exactly what you're saying with language. You will hear people say, and I'm going to use this analogy because I think it will like really land for people to like catch this in communication. Let's say you meet someone tomorrow and they say, I want a wife and kids. That's very different than I want to be a father and a husband. Same thing applies in the workplace with what you're saying. It's like, these are my employees. That doesn't feel good for
I,
anyone who hears that. And it's like the nuance of that language, right? It's like I want a wife and kids. It's like, no, I want to be a father and a husband. I
mm,
want employees. No, you want to be a leader and you want to be of service to the people who are on your team. And you can tell where somebody's at in their own psychology and their personal development based on how they talk about things and how they present ideas. And some people don't even know they're doing it. So I love that you were just like, hey, course correct. It's kind of like biting the dog in the ear and being like, hey, like that's not the path. And somebody who's open and receptive will hear that. And it will probably be the last time that they ever frame it that way. And like, we need that in society. We need to be willing to kind of like bite the fucking ear and be like, that's
yeah.
not it, man. That's how we course correct. And people are unwilling to bite the ear sometimes. And you don't have to be a dick about it, but like, we need that. Sometimes we can't read the label from inside the bottle.
But again, all this can be ironed out if it was started from the top. Yeah, it starts from the top. The training process, the educational part, the follow-up process. That's something that I feel there is no follow-up process. And what I find strange, and I find this such such a quick fix is when a manager starts to become on the poorer side of managing and leading teams, that there should be a little probation period that they shouldn't pass. I find that managers, however poor they are, because they don't have the overseen sort of ongoing education or a senior manager watching over them and training them, it's typically someone of a lower position than theirs, is that there isn't a follow-up process to actually say, do you know what? You haven't made the cut. That is something that never or rarely ever happens, that a manager won't pass probation. And again, then the vicious cycle continues. So in terms of how to deal with having a bad manager above you, I can hate that. But people will say, I've got a bad manager above me. Get me in your workplace. That's the answer. Get Aaron round
Well,
and Natasha in America. How do people deal with it? I've got my own answers, but if someone is listening to this and they do have a bad manager and they do kind of dread going into the workplace for whatever reason, again, they feel maybe a little bit trapped, low self-esteem. What do they do with a bad manager? They enjoy the job, they enjoy the team, but it is that one person. What's kind of your guidance on that?
think you need to identify like what the biggest constraints and issues are dealing with that person. I think sometimes we can get really fixated on, oh, this person's just toxic. Okay, cool. But like tangibly, what are the things that are happening to you on a daily basis that are making your working relationship with this person difficult? Okay. They give me really unclear instructions. Amazing. When it comes time to doing a project, hey, I know we're working on this. I need clarity on these things so I know what to prioritize. Shift your communication to hold a higher degree of responsibility. But you can't even get to that point if you are blanket statement, this person's a piece of shit. Okay, well, like where are the areas of friction? And then what can you do to support yourself in interacting with this person? I feel like I say something to them and then they twist my words. Okay, amazing. You have a meeting with that person and then you send an email and you tag the people you need to and you have fucking receipts for like what was discussed. Like take care of yourself. So I think to me, the first thing, I can't give an example for every single thing, but the first part is just like identify what the biggest constraints are with dealing with this person and then use critical thinking to figure out what is your best path with navigating this or interacting with this person. They're high stress or like they give me unclear expectations, they change their mind all the time. Okay, cool. What can you put in place that forces clarity and holds them accountable and responsible to what they're asking you to do? And you can do that in a way without pissing everybody off, right? And how you frame it and how you communicate it. So to me, that's step number one. Number two, also, I think sometimes people just exacerbate the fuck out of stuff. They're a little bit difficult to deal with. Cool. Are you making it more intense than it needs to be because you refuse to put any boundaries in place or put guardrails for how you're willing to engage with somebody? Because to the degree you are frustrated with them is the degree that you're frustrated with yourself for like not supporting what you need. It's not their job. They're not going to help you.
I think what you're saying as well is identifying how is it being caused? What's the common patterns? Like what keeps happening? Am I a part of it? I think all of that needs to be done. And I would just say to add on to that, because I agree with the way that you said it as well, but I would say when you are going through a problem with a certain manager or it keeps happening, is you need to be, again, I think going back to like accountability, I think you need to ask yourself, right, the problems are occurring because of certain things happening on a daily basis. Well, what are those things happening? Am I a contributing factor to that problem happening? And I think also, because look, I'm not saying all managers are the problem and stuff like that, because I know there's some awful employees and people that cause their own issues and stuff. But I do think there's that you need to reverse engineer. Okay, how does this keep happening? Am I at fault? But also not getting emotionally involved too much, not thinking that this is personal, because although sometimes it is personal, I think people need to remember I need to make a calculated decision whether I speak with them directly, whether this goes above. Am I actually a part of the problem? If so, if I do raise this, is this going to come back on me? And they're going to look at it because I've seen this before where people again have been reactive, and this is a common theme, isn't it? Where people are reactive, they say something, and everyone's quick to do that in the workplace, isn't it? They get pulled into a meeting and then they're quick to snap. And then someone who's not emotionally involved actually turns around and says, well, I'm looking at it from both sides. You haven't been doing that. They've asked. It's kind of on you at the moment, but you're just maybe you just don't like the person. So I think a self-evaluation first. How do these problems keep happening? And then my answer to all of this, just because the person that I am, is I do believe have everything in an email thread after you've spoken, even if it's just between the two people, you and the manager. But literally just pulling the manager aside and reminding yourself you're going to speak with a human. I
Yeah.
always say that. I always say to people, remember, you're not talking with a manager, you're talking with a human who you're having problems with. Forget about the four walls and go and talk to the human that's giving you issues and just be very honest. And then to do the formalities of go away and say to them after, look, you're making me feel like this. This is the problem. You've asked me to do something, but you haven't communicated. It's really starting to get to me. I do need you to politely back up. I'm going to try and improve my end. And finally, as we conclude this, I'm just going to pop all this in an email to you. If you think there's anything I've missed, send it back over to me, just so we have an email thread between the two of us that we've had this chat.
Yeah.
Honestly, I find that that would sort most problems because then they know you're serious. They might think twice, but also their points they're going to send back to you might make you reflect.
Yeah. Something I would add to that when having those conversations is like framing your language. Because if you go to somebody, and I'll share this from like where I'm at in my own kind of journey with stuff. If someone came to me and was like, you make me feel this way, I'd be like, what a victim you are. Like nobody makes you feel anything, right? So I would change the language because somebody will be more receptive to, I notice this and I don't understand it. And I notice that I feel this way when X thing happens. That is responsibility. That is not putting the onus on somebody else because nobody else makes you feel shit. It is your choice to feel that way. So I think that slight change in language is going to be such a it's so unconscious for people when they hear it, but it's such a higher degree of responsibility. And you're probably going to get a better response because if you think of going to your romantic partner and they say, well, every time you do this, it makes me feel this way. You make me feel this way. Your partner's going to be like, what the fuck? You're immediately defensive, right? Because you're blaming somebody. And regardless if it is their contribution to the issue or not is irrelevant. I'm talking about responsibility and who do you want to show up as in this world. So I would say the exact same thing, change the language to, I notice this and I notice that I feel this way when it happens, blah, 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 and then take the conversation forward. You will get so much more respect from people.
Yeah. I think if anyone listening at this point, right, takes all these little things that we've spoken about, the boundaries, understanding your own values and standards, having a little bit of purpose. I think also that's something maybe we didn't touch on, but having some purpose, I think people get caught up in the rut of the 9 to 5 going, through the motions and I suppose getting to a point of thinking, well, there's nothing else out there for me. This is kind of what life's like. And, people talk down to me and, it's kind of happening to everyone. So this is just normal. You kind of lose, like when you were a kid, we all had kind of like aspirations to do things, we all had like dreams of some sort, we all thought outside the box at one point because we didn't know any better. And I
Yeah.
feel that when people lose their purpose, they have a little bit of a nosedive with self-esteem. And that makes them very sort of almost like susceptible to the we call them workplace problems. To me, if I was to go back into a job now, and I think you'd be the same, I'd be a fucking nightmare because I don't think I'd last. I wouldn't last because I just wouldn't do anything because I would do the things that I'd have to do, but then I go, I do everything so much differently because now my mind has been opened up to so much more in entrepreneurship. But I think for anyone listening is that the workplace problems, as you've just said, you're choosing to let them make you feel that way. If you're being bullied, you're actually allowing someone to do it because that is something you could control. You can make a decision. Like everyone has a choice, right? I think that's the thing. Everyone can make a decision, right?
Yeah. But well, because the alternative is that you are a victim of circumstances and nothing in your life will ever get better. So like those are your paths. Either you're fully responsible for how you show up in this world and the decisions you make and what you tolerate and what you don't. And that gives you some sense of control that you can guide your life in the direction that you want it to. Or you're a victim, everything happens to you, nothing happens for you, and your life's gonna suck forever until you die. Like, those are your paths. So, like, but which fucking pill are you taking, right? And how are you going to navigate this world? Because it's like a lot of the questions I get asked, yes, it's low self-esteem, but I also read it and I'm just like, you are in such a victim mentality. And until you take full ownership for your life and responsibility for how you move through this world, none of this changes.
Yeah, I love it because I've said things in so many words of what you've just said in terms of, no one's coming to save any of you. And that's the thing, right? I think when you realize that things only change when you do, that's when life gets really good. I find that, as we sort of summarize, when you take accountability and you kind of go, do you know what? I've made bad decisions. It's been pretty poor in some situations and this and that, but I'm going to own all of it. But where I'm going forward, I'm just gonna take responsibility for everything, and I'm gonna try and be more proactive. I'm gonna have boundaries. I'm gonna set some values that and standards that I'm not gonna break away from, and anyone that comes into my circle, my ecosystem, has to fit within those. And that's when life gets really good. And I think I don't know about you, but I'm endorsing entrepreneurship. Anyone, that's what I talk about. But yes, but my final words are to anyone listening is don't put up with any crap in the 9 to 5. There's no amount of salary that uh, defines what someone should talk to you. And, everyone's worth more. Everyone's a human being. I used to hate it when people would go, oh, so and so's coming on site, and everyone would be running around like headless chickens. And I honestly, I used to be looking at thinking people going, "You're all running around because a human being that's on like £17,000 more than all of you, you're all running around like headless chickens." It's mad. So, what's your final tips to anyone listening, kind of on the subjects that we've covered off, around the workplace today?
What you tolerate is what you endorse. If you continue to accept your life for what it is, and even how, and I'll take it a layer deeper, it's like, even accept your perspective of it. Nothing is going to change for you because as long as your perspective is what it is right now, you will not question how you show up. You will not do things differently. You will not grow as a person. And everything in your life will be, woe is me. My boss sucks. My manager sucks. And it's like, yeah, maybe. And so what? Like, what are you gonna fucking do
Yes.
about it? Yeah, because like I'm all here for creating the content and the awareness. And like I think in some ways our audience is slightly different from one another's because you're in the like escape your 9 to 5, fuck this, set boundaries at work. And my camp is like, yo, if you're a manager or a leader, get your shit together because this is what you're doing. So like I'm always going to come from the angle of like, how do I help the people who are in those roles make it better for everyone in the company? But at the end of the day, it's like what you tolerate is what you endorse. And that's at every single level, regardless if you are entrepreneurial, if you're in a leadership or management role, or if you work for a company and your personal relationships as well.
Yeah. So the great thing between me and Natasha is I'm battering them down and Natasha's building them back up. I'm hitting them over there to you.
Yeah, just slapping the shit out of everybody. And I'm like, okay, grab you
Yeah,
by the scruff of the neck. It's
I'm
okay.
dropping them off. Right, you can have that one now. He's pretty knackered. You can build him back up to what he should be. I mean, we need to get on stage at some point. If you ever come over to the UK, we'll have you on our event stage. We've got a great company in London. We'll have you on the stage. You come over.
Sounds-
I love it. Honestly, I could talk about this all day. People are loving it on the live. People are loving it on the live stream. So Natasha, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm going to include all of your links in the description. So I'm probably going to duet some more of your content. I've got some duet filming, so I'm probably going to take a load of your content and I'll re-tag you up because those do some juicy numbers on TikTok. So we can
I love it.
drive some of the traffic. And yeah, look, it's just been a pleasure. I love to talk about this and just very authentic and real. So thank you for coming on. And anyone who is there anything you've got going on at the moment? You've got anything you want people to look at in particular, or just check out your socials?
Yeah, if they go to my socials, the best place to find me is our newsletter, and it's in the link. It's the only link in every single one of my social media pages, and it's called The Huddle. And it's designed to everything I talked about, personal development, communication, how do you grow as an individual? How do you get to a place that like you just stop taking so much shit from everybody and you learn how to communicate in a way that isn't detrimental to the outcome you're trying to get?
I love that. I'm sure there's a lot of people on my YouTube and then my Instagram and TikTok that would love to check out that newsletter. So awesome. Right, everyone who has watched, I thank you so much for joining us. It's been a long, juicy podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.